Hi guys, it's Stacy with Handmade by Stacy J. Today I'm going to do a tutorial for you that shows the ruching stitch. So we have this option and we have two options. We have another option. So you have a different separator between the stitches, and I'm going to show you how to do this. You can go on my website at www.handmadebystacyj.com where you can get the written directions for both the stitch and these two squares. So if you're making a blanket and you have a square you're not too crazy about and you want to add this one in, you can totally do that. Or if you were to make this longer and make a nifty little scarf, this one does tend to lay flatter, whereas this one is a little bit wonkier on the edges. So the stitch pattern does work in multiples of 1, and it uses 2 different size needles, and it's a 14-row repeat, but it's super easy. It's just knit and purl, and you can knock this out in no time. So let's go ahead and get started. This is option 1, which has the stockinette, and this is option 2, which has the garter ridges that separate. So we're going to get started with option 1 first, and if you want to skip ahead to option 2, there will be a time code in the notes where you can go ahead and jump ahead. So to start this, you will need 2 different size needles. So I'm using a US size 8, which is 5.0 millimeters, and a US 7, which is 4.5 millimeters. And the way this stitch is created, which gives it this texture, which is just so cool, is that you work regular rows and then you go in and you double the amount of stitches. Then you work that for a few rows and then you go in and you reduce the amount of stitches, which makes it ruche up like this. So let's go ahead and get started. With your larger knitting needles, you'll want to do your cast on, and I'm just going to use a long tail cast on, and for demonstration purposes I'm only going to cast on 10. Okay, so we have 10 cast on. Now we're going to begin, and this starts with the wrong side, so we're going to begin by purling. Now for row 2 on the right side now, we're going to knit. Now row 3, we'll turn, and we're going to purl. So we're essentially working stockinette for a few rows. For row 4, we knit. Row 5, we purl. In row 6, we knit. Row 7, we purl. Now on row 8, we're going to double the amount of stitches we have. And we're going to do that by doing a knit front and back in each stitch across. So we'll knit front and back, knit front, knit back, and that will bring us up to 20 stitches. Now that we've doubled our stitches, we're going to switch to our smaller needles. So I'm going to grab my size 7 needle, and we're going to purl across. Now we're on row 10, so I'm going to move my larger needles out of the way. And now we're going to knit. With row 11, we'll purl. For row 12, we'll knit. Row 13, we will purl. Row 14, we're going to decrease this by half by doing a knit 2 together across the row. And you'll see how it is just a little bit wonky because you did double that. But now we're going to cinch it all in and start getting that ruching effect. So let's begin by knit 2 together. We have 1, and now we're going to knit 2 together again. And you just continue doing that across the row. Now, it may not look like much when you do the decrease, but once you start repeating rows 1 through 7 again with the larger needles, then you'll start getting it to all kind of pinch back together. So after you finish the K2 together row, you'll begin again with row 1, working to row 14, but you'll begin row 1 with the larger needles. So I'm going to do one more repeat of this so that you can see how it looks. So I've repeated rows 1 through 14 once more, and then I worked rows 1 through 7 once more and bound off knitwise. And you'll see it does have a little bit of a wonky shape. However, if you bind it to a blanket and you're just working with the stitches on the side, you'll end up with the bunched up ruching. So kind of like what you see on this square. And you'll see the edges on it are also wonky, but well, let me show you here. So you see how the edges are, but if you block it and then you make it flat and then you sew it onto a blanket, that's when you end up with the ruching texture. And it's a really nice squishy texture. But if you're looking for something that lays a little bit flat, I'll show you how to do option 2. And this one lays, whoops, let's get to the right side. This one lays a lot flatter and it has more of a square shape. So let me show you how to do this. This one's actually a lot easier and it goes a lot quicker because you're simply working a garter stitch instead of the stockinette stitch. So let's go ahead and show you option number 2. For option 2, we still need 2 different size needles. And because I'm using a worsted weight, I'm using a size US 8, which is the 5mm, and a US 7, which is the 4.5mm. So with my larger needles, I'm going to cast on 10 just for demonstration purposes. Now, just like option 1, option 2 begins on the wrong side, and you're going to knit. Now row 2, we will also knit. And just to make this tutorial a little bit quicker and easier for you, you'll essentially just knit rows 3 through 7. So we'll knit rows 3 through 7, and then I'll meet you back here. Now we're ready for row 8. For row 8, we're going to double the amount of stitches, and we're going to do that by doing a knit front and back in each stitch across. Now I've doubled the amount of stitches with row 8, so for row 9, we're going to switch to our smaller needles, and we're going to start working a stockinette section. So for row 9, we're going to purl. Now that we're done with row 9, we're ready for row 10. So I'm going to take my larger needles and set them aside. And with the smaller, we're going to knit across. For row 11, we purl. For row 12, we'll knit across. For row 13, we'll purl. And now we're on the last row of our pattern repeat. So we're going to reduce the amount of stitches by half, and we're going to do that by knitting 2 together across the row. So knit 2 together, and knit 2 together. And just do that all the way around the row, or across the row. And now your stitches are reduced by half. So you'll repeat rows 1 through 14 to your desired length, and then you'll bind off, and you'll end up with this kind of pattern. So I do hope that you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please give me a thumbs up or subscribe. I do have more tutorials coming out. You can also find the written directions for this as well as the patterns for the blocks for free on my website at www.handmadebystacyj.com. Thanks very much. Happy knitting!